She pressed the pistol against her own temple and whispered, "If you're one of his men, I'll pull this trigger before you touch these children." 6 small faces stared from the shadows behind her. Blood pooled beneath her torn dress. And Silas Brennan, a man who hadn't spoken to God in 3 years, found himself praying for the first time since he buried his wife. The winter of 1879 had just delivered something to his doorstep that would either destroy him or save his soul. Stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The gunshot cracked through the howling wind like a bone breaking. Silas Brennan dropped the firewood and grabbed his Winchester before the echo died. 45 years on this earth had taught him one thing, that sound meant trouble. Not hunters, not a tree branch. Trouble. His boots were already moving toward the barn. "Lord Almighty," he muttered, pushing through snow that reached his knees. The cold bit through his coat like teeth, but he barely felt it. 3 years of numbness had made him immune to most things. The barn door was cracked open. Just an inch. Just enough for someone to slip through. He pressed his shoulder against the wood and listened. Breathing, ragged, desperate. And beneath it whimpering. The kind children made when they were too scared to cry. Silas kicked the door open and raised his rifle. What he saw stopped his heart. A woman crouched in the corner, half hidden behind hay bales. Her dress was torn. Her left side was soaked dark with blood. And clutched in her shaking hand was a pistol not pointed at him, pointed at her own head. "Don't come closer!" Her voice cracked like thin ice. "I swear to God I'll do it." "Easy now." Silas kept his voice low, steady, the way he talked to spooked horses. "I ain't gonna hurt you." That's what he said. Her laugh was hollow, broken. "That's exactly what he said before he killed my husband." Behind her, 6 children huddled together like a litter of pups seeking warmth. Their eyes, God, their eyes, wide, terrified. The oldest boy, maybe 14, had positioned himself in front of the smaller ones. His jaw was set, but his hands were trembling. "I don't know who he is, ma'am, but I ain't him." Silas slowly lowered his rifle. "This is my barn, my land. Name's Silas Brennan. How do I know you're not lying?" "You don't." He set the Winchester on the ground and straightened up, hands visible. "But I just gave up my only weapon. So if you're gonna shoot somebody, might as well be me and not yourself." The woman's arm wavered. The pistol dipped an inch before she forced it back up. "Mama!" A small voice whispered. A little girl couldn't be more than 8 with dark hair and almond-shaped eyes. "Mama, I'm so cold." The woman flinched at the word. "She's not—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "They're all mine now, every single one." Silas took a step forward, slow, deliberate. "How long since any of you ate?" No answer. But the way the children's eyes fixed on him at the mention of food told him everything. "I got a fire going in my cabin, warm beds, venison stew been simmering all day." He took another step. "I ain't asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust that those children need food and warmth more than you need to hold that gun." The woman's face crumpled. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Silas to see the exhaustion, the grief, the desperate love that had kept her running when any sane person would have stopped. "He'll find us." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Victor always finds us." "Victor who?" "Victor Weston, my brother-in-law." She nearly choked on the words. "He killed my husband, shot him in the back, and now there's a bounty on my head for a murder I didn't commit." "How much?" $75. Silas let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of money." The woman's hand tightened on the pistol. Her eyes went hard again. "Good thing I ain't interested in money." He held out his hand. "What's your name?" A long pause. The wind howled outside, rattling the barn doors. "Clara." The word came out like a confession. Clara Weston. Well, Clara Weston. I'm gonna pick you up now because you're about 30 seconds from bleeding out on my barn floor. You can keep the pistol if it makes you feel better. Just try not to shoot me while I'm saving your life." She might have laughed, might have sobbed. Either way, when Silas bent down and lifted her into his arms, she didn't resist. She weighed nothing, felt like holding a bird, all hollow bones and fading warmth. "Children." Silas turned to face those 6 terrified faces. "Can you walk?" The oldest boy stepped forward. His dark eyes had seen too much. "We've walked 300 miles, mister. We can walk a little more." "What's your name, son?" "Daniel. Daniel Marsh." He squared his shoulders like he was preparing for a fight. "These are my people. My sister Ruth, Samuel, Lily, and the twins Jacob and Josiah." "Daniel." Silas met his gaze and held it. "I need you to take the little one's hands and follow me. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good man." The journey to the cabin nearly killed him. Not the cold, not the weight of the woman in his arms, but the sound of those children struggling through the drifts behind him. Their breathing harsh and labored, their small bodies fighting against a winter that showed no mercy. Daniel kept them moving. Silas could hear him urging the younger ones forward. "Just a little more. There's food waiting. Warm food. Come on, Lily, you can do it." Jacob stopped crying. "We're almost there." 14 years old and already carrying the weight of the world. Clara had lost consciousness by the time Silas shouldered open the cabin door. Her blood had soaked through his coat, warm against his chest in the freezing air. He laid her down by the fire as gently as he could manage. "Shut the door," he told Daniel. "Bar it behind you." The boy obeyed without question. Silas turned his attention to Clara's wound, high on her left leg just above the knee. When he carefully tore the fabric to examine it, his stomach dropped. Bullet still in there. Infection already setting in. Red lines spreading outward like poison. "Daniel." He didn't look up. "Find the kitchen, pot of stew on the stove, bowls in the cupboard. Get everyone fed." "Yes, sir." "And there's a bottle of whiskey on the shelf above the stove. Bring it here, clean rags too, hot water if the kettle's still warm." The boy moved fast, efficient. Silas felt a surge of gratitude for his competence. "Mr. A small voice at his elbow. He turned to find the little girl with the dark hair and almond eyes. Lily Daniel had called her. "Is Mama Clara gonna die?" The question hit him like a fist to the chest. "Not if I can help it, sweetheart." "Promise." Silas looked at this child, this small, scared, hopeful child, and thought about all the promises he'd made in his life. The ones he'd kept, the ones he'd broken. "I promise I'll do everything I can." Ruth, the 12-year-old girl, appeared and gently took Lily's hand. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." "But I want to stay with Mama Clara." "She needs quiet right now. Mr. Silas is going to help her." Daniel returned with the supplies. His face was pale as he looked at Clara's wound. "I need you to hold her," Silas said. "When I start, she's gonna wake up screaming. You gotta keep her still." "I can't." "You can. You have to." Silas met his eyes. "If she moves while I'm doing this, she'll die. Do you understand?" The boy swallowed hard. Then he nodded. "I understand." Clara woke screaming. The pain tore through the fever like lightning, and her eyes flew open with a wild terror that nearly broke Silas's heart. "Hold her!" he shouted. Daniel pressed down on her shoulders, his young face set in grim determination. "I'm sorry," Silas whispered. "I'm so sorry, but this has to come out." "Just do it!" Clara's voice was barely a gasp. "Just—" He did. The bullet came out with a gush of infected blood that made even Daniel look away. Clara screamed again, her whole body convulsing, and then mercifully she passed out. Silas worked quickly, cleaned the wound with whiskey, packed it with clean cloth, tied off the bandage with hands that shook from exhaustion and something he couldn't name. When he finally sat back, his shirt was soaked with her blood. "Will she live?" Daniel's voice was small, scared. For the first time, he sounded like what he was, a child who had seen too much. "I don't know," Silas said honestly. "Next few hours will tell." "She has to." The boy's composure cracked. "She's the only one who came back for us." "What do you mean?" Daniel looked at the other children who had finished eating and were huddled together near the fire. Ruth was holding the twins. Samuel had fallen asleep with his head in Lily's lap. "We had families," he said quietly. "Had them. They died. Fever mostly. Some from hunger. Some from—" He stopped. "Clara and her husband found us. Mr. Henry, he was good to us. Treated us like we were worth something." "Where's Henry now?" "Dead." The word was flat. Empty. "Victor killed him. Shot him in the back when he wouldn't hand over Clara. Called it an accident. Said Henry drew on him first." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "But we saw. All of us. We saw everything." "When was this?" 6 weeks ago. Maybe more. We've been running ever since. Victor, he's got money, got men, got the law on his side. Everyone thinks Clara killed her husband because that's what Victor told them." Silas looked down at the unconscious woman on his floor. This stranger who had taken in orphans she didn't have to save, who had kept running even with a bullet in her leg, who had been ready to die in a frozen barn rather than let anyone hurt the children she'd claimed as her own. Something stirred in his chest, something that had been dead for 3 years. "The truth matters to me," he said. Daniel stared at him. "Why?" "You don't know us. We're nothing to you. You're something now." Silas stood, his joints aching from the cold and the work. "You came to my door. You're under my roof. That makes you mine to protect." "Victor will come." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "When he finds out we're here, he'll come with guns and men and money. And he won't stop until he gets what he wants." "What does he want?" "Clara. The children. Everything his brother had." Daniel's jaw tightened. He said if Henry wouldn't share, then Henry didn't deserve any of it. "Then I reckon Victor Weston and I are going to have a conversation." The boy looked at him like he was crazy. "You don't understand. Victor has connections, important people, judges, politicians. You're just one man." "I've been just one man against worse odds." Silas's voice carried a weight that made Daniel fall silent. "I survived Antietam. Watched my whole company die around me and kept fighting. I buried my wife and my son in the same week and kept breathing." He knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. "Your Clara, she didn't give up on you. I ain't gonna give up on her. That's a promise, Daniel, and I don't break my promises." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel nodded, just once. But in that nod was something that looked almost like hope. The fever broke just before dawn. Silas had been sitting beside Clara all night, keeping the fire stoked, changing her bandages, forcing sips of water between her cracked lips whenever she surfaced from unconsciousness. The children had fallen asleep in a pile near the hearth. Ruth had kept watch for hours before exhaustion claimed her too. Daniel was the last to go, his young body finally surrendering to the warmth and safety he'd been denied for weeks. When Clara's eyes opened, they were clearer than before. The wild terror was gone, replaced by confusion and a pain that cut deeper than any bullet wound. "Where? Don't move." Silas put a gentle hand on her good shoulder. "You're safe. My cabin. The children are sleeping right there." Her head turned. Her eyes found them 6 small figures huddled together, finally at peace. A tear slid down her hollow cheek. "You should have left us." Her whisper was barely audible. "Should have just let us die." "Maybe." Silas handed her a cup of water. "But I didn't. Why? It was the same question she'd asked in the barn, and Silas still didn't have a good answer. My wife died 3 years ago, he said finally. Sarah, she was... He stopped, started again. She was everything to me. When she passed, I made myself a promise. I'd never let anyone else die when I could have done something. You couldn't have saved everyone. No, but I can save you. He met her eyes. If you let me. Clara was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had finally stopped howling. Victor will come, she said. He always comes. Let him. You don't understand what he's capable of. Maybe not. Silas stood, his back aching from the long night. But he don't know what I'm capable of either. Clara stared up at this stranger who had saved her life, taken in her children, and spoken of her enemy like he was nothing more than a storm to be weathered. Why are you doing this? Her voice broke. We're nothing to you. Just a bleeding woman and 6 orphans who stumbled into your barn. That's where you're wrong. Silas reached down and pulled the blanket higher over her shoulders. The moment you walked through that door, you became something more. What? He paused at the doorway, silhouetted against the gray light of dawn. You became family. The first sign of trouble came 3 days later. Clara was sitting up now, still weak, but healing faster than Silas had any right to expect. She'd insisted on helping Ruth with the cooking, and the cabin was filled with smells that Silas hadn't experienced in years. Fresh bread, stew thick with vegetables, something that might have been apple cobbler. The children had settled in with an ease that surprised him. Daniel had taken to helping with the cattle, his quick mind absorbing everything Silas taught him. Samuel spent hours asking questions about the ranch, the land, the animals. The twins had stopped crying in their sleep. Even Lily, the quiet one, had started drawing pictures on the frost-covered windows. For 3 days, it almost felt like peace. Then Daniel came running from the ridge, his face white. Riders coming, 8 of them, maybe more. Silas grabbed his rifle. How far? 20 minutes, maybe less. Clara had already struggled to her feet, her face drawn with a terror that made her look 10 years older. It's Victor. It has to be. Might not be. But even as Silas said it, he knew she was right. What do we do? Ruth asked, her voice trembling. She'd gathered the younger children behind her, a 12-year-old standing guard like a soldier. Silas looked at Clara, at the children, at the home he'd built with his own hands, the home that had been silent and cold for 3 years until these strangers crashed into his life. Daniel. His voice was calm, steady. Take the little ones to the root cellar. There's a hidden door behind the flour sacks. You remember where I showed you? Yes, sir. Good. Take food, water, the old blankets from the chest. Don't come out until I come get you myself. You hear my voice saying your full name, Daniel Jacob Marsh. That's how you'll know it's safe. The boy didn't move. What about you? What about Clara? Clara and I are going to have a conversation with these visitors. I'm staying. Daniel's chin lifted. I saw what Victor did to Mr. Henry. I'm a witness. My testimony. Your testimony won't matter if you're dead. Silas gripped the boy's shoulder. I need you to protect them. The little ones. Ruth. They need you more than I do right now. Daniel's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. You promised. You said you wouldn't give up on us. I ain't giving up. I'm giving you a job. Silas's voice softened. The most important job there is. Keeping your family safe. Can you do that for me? A long moment passed. Then Daniel nodded. Yes, sir. Good man. Now go. Ruth herded the smaller children toward the back of the cabin. Samuel was carrying Lily, who had gone silent and pale. The twins clung to each other, their faces mirror images of fear. Don't let the bad men take us, Josiah whispered as he passed. It was the first time Silas had heard him speak. I won't, he said. I promise. The cellar door closed. The cabin fell silent. Clara had retrieved her pistol from where Silas had hidden it. Her hands were steady now, her jaw set with a determination that made her look less like a victim and more like a warrior. "You should hide too," Silas said. "He killed my husband." Her voice was ice. "I'm not hiding from him anymore. You can barely stand. I can stand enough to shoot the man who murdered Henry." Silas wanted to argue, wanted to throw her over his shoulder and lock her in the cellar with the children. But he saw the look in her eyes, the same look he'd seen in soldiers who'd lost everything and had nothing left to fear, and he knew there was no point. "Then stay behind me," he said, "and don't shoot unless I'm already dead." They stepped out onto the porch together. The riders crested the hill just as the sun broke through the clouds. 8 men heavily armed, their horses steaming in the cold air. And at the front, dressed in a coat that cost more than everything Silas owned, sat Victor Weston. He was handsome. That was the first thing Silas noticed. Handsome in a cold way, like a statue carved from marble. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that held no warmth, no humanity, nothing but calculation. He smiled when he saw Clara. "Sister." His voice carried across the snow. "I've been looking everywhere for you." None. Victor reined in his horse about 50 feet from the porch. His men fanned out behind him, their hands resting on their weapons. "Mr. Brennan?" Victor tipped his hat like they were meeting at a church social. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Don't need introduction." Silas kept his rifle casual, ready. "I know who you are. I know what you done." "Is that so?" Victor's smile didn't waver. "And what, pray tell, have I done? You murdered your brother, shot him in the back while he was protecting his wife and children." An interesting version of events. Victor swung down from his horse with the easy grace of a man who'd never worked a day in his life. But not the version that's been accepted by the courts. "According to the official record, my brother was killed by that woman standing behind you. The same woman who kidnapped 6 children and fled across 3 territories to escape justice." "That's a lie." Clara's voice shook with rage. "You know it's a lie." "What I know, dear sister, is that there's a bounty on your head. $75 for your capture, dead or alive." Victor's eyes flickered to Silas. "That's a lot of money for a man living alone on a failing ranch." "I ain't interested in money." "Everyone's interested in money, Mr. Brennan. It's simply a matter of finding the right price." Silas raised his rifle, not pointing at Victor yet, just making sure everyone could see it. "Here's the only price that matters. You turn around, you ride off my land, and you don't come back. That's the deal." Victor laughed. It was a pleasant sound, cultured and warm, and it made Silas's skin crawl. "I'm afraid that's not acceptable. You see, I'm not leaving without my brother's widow and my brother's children. They're my responsibility now. My property, in a sense." "Children ain't property." "The law would disagree." Victor took a step forward. "I have documents, signed by judges, sealed by the territorial authority. Those children are legally mine, and that woman is a wanted criminal who will face trial for my brother's murder." "You're the murderer." Clara's pistol was up now, aimed directly at Victor's chest. "You shot Henry while his back was turned. I watched you do it. The children watched you do it." The testimony of a widow who inherits everything if her husband dies mysteriously? Victor shook his head with theatrical sympathy. "The courts have already decided that's not particularly credible. And the children, well, children can be convinced to say anything, can't they? Especially by a woman desperate to avoid the gallows." "You son of a—" "Careful, sister." Victor's voice went cold. "There are 6 armed men behind me who would love nothing more than to earn their bonus. One word from me, and this unfortunate confrontation becomes a tragedy. Rancher killed defending a wanted criminal. Such a shame." Silas felt the tension in his shoulders. 8 against 2. Not good odds. But he'd faced worse at Antietam. He'd watched men die all around him and kept fighting. He wasn't about to stop now. "Here's how this is gonna go," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had nothing left to lose. "You can shoot me. Probably will eventually. But before I go down, I'm putting a bullet right between your eyes. Not your men. You." Victor's smile flickered. "Then your boys can shoot Clara. Maybe. If she don't take 2 or 3 of them with her first." Silas took a step forward. "And then what? You got 6 children hidden somewhere on this property. You think they're just gonna come out and shake your hand? Daniel Marsh is 14 years old, and he's already lost everyone he ever loved. You think he ain't gonna fight? You think he ain't gonna run? I have resources. You got money. That ain't the same thing." Silas's voice dropped. "Dangerous. I got friends in this territory. Neighbors. A sheriff who ain't afraid of fancy lawyers. You start a bloodbath on my land, you better be prepared for what comes after." Victor's eyes flickered to his men. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Silas to see the first crack in his confidence. "This isn't over," Victor said. "No, it ain't." Silas kept his rifle steady. "But today you're gonna ride away. You're gonna go back to wherever you came from. And you're gonna think real hard about whether those children are worth dying for." A long moment passed. The wind picked up swirling snow between them like a curtain of white. Then Victor smiled. Different this time. Colder. "Very well, Mr. Brennan. You've won today." He turned back toward his horse. "But I want you to remember something. I always get what I want. Always. It's just a matter of time." He swung up into the saddle and wheeled his horse around. "I'll be back," he called over his shoulder. "And next time, I won't be so polite." The riders disappeared over the hill. Clara's knees buckled. Silas caught her before she hit the ground. "It's okay," he said, holding her against his chest. "They're gone. For now?" Her voice was muffled against his coat. "Only for now. Then we'll be ready for when they come back." She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears and exhaustion and something that might have been hope. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you fighting for us?" Silas thought about the question, thought about Sarah, about the son he'd never held, about 3 years of silence and grief and wanting to die. Then he thought about 6 children in a root cellar waiting to find out if the world was finally safe. "Because you came to my door," he said, "and I don't turn away from my door." He helped her back inside, and together they went to tell the children that they were still alive, that they were still fighting, that somehow, impossibly, they might actually survive this. The cellar door creaked open, and Daniel's face appeared pale and drawn in the dim light. "Is it safe?" "It's safe." Silas extended his hand. "Come on out." Daniel climbed up first, then turned to help the others. Ruth emerged carrying Josiah, who had fallen asleep despite the terror. Samuel followed with Lily clinging to his back. Jacob came last, his small face streaked with dried tears. "Where are the bad men?" Lily whispered. "Gone." Clara knelt down, wincing from the pain in her leg. "They're gone, sweetheart." "Are they coming back?" Clara looked at Silas. He saw the question in her eyes, the desperate hope that he would lie, that he would tell these children something they could believe in. "Probably," he said. Ruth's face crumpled. "Then what was the point? What was the point of any of it?" "The point is, we're still here." Silas's voice was firm. "The point is, we bought ourselves time. And time is everything when you're fighting a war." "This ain't a war," Daniel said bitterly. "Wars end. Victor won't ever stop. Then we make him stop." "How?" The boy's voice cracked. "You saw how many men he had. You saw his guns, his horses, his fancy clothes. He's got judges in his pocket, politicians. The whole territory thinks Clara's a murderer. How do you fight that?" Silas was quiet for a moment. He looked at the 6 children standing before him, scared, exhausted, beaten down by a world that had given them nothing but pain. "You fight it one day at a time," he said. "You get stronger. You find allies. You build something worth protecting. And when they come for you again, you're ready." "That's a nice speech." Daniel's jaw tightened. "But speeches don't stop bullets." "No, they don't. Silas met the boy's eyes. "That's why tomorrow I'm going to teach you how to shoot." The next morning came cold and clear. Silas was up before dawn stoking the fire, heating water for coffee. His body ached from days of tension and sleepless nights, but there was no time for rest. Victor would regroup. Victor would plan. And when he returned, Silas needed to be ready. "You didn't sleep." He turned to find Clara standing in the doorway of the small bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, her weight carefully balanced on her good leg. "Neither did you." "Couldn't." She limped toward the fire, and Silas moved without thinking to help her. She accepted his arm, leaning against him as she lowered herself into a chair. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him. Victor, standing over Henry's body, smiling." "Tell me about Henry." Clara was quiet for a long moment. "He was good. That's the simplest way to say it. He was good in a world that punishes goodness." She stared into the flames. "We couldn't have children of our own. Something wrong with me, the doctors said. Henry never blamed me, never even hinted that I'd failed him. He just said maybe God had other plans. The orphans. We found Daniel first, collapsed by the side of the road outside Denver, his whole family gone to cholera. Henry wouldn't leave him, wouldn't even discuss it." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. That's just who he was. He saw someone hurting and he helped. Simple as that. And the others? One by one, Ruth and the twins at an orphanage that was more like a prison. Samuel wandering alone after a wagon train massacre. Lily. Clara's voice caught. Lily's father was a railroad worker. Chinese. He died in a blasting accident, and no one would take her in. Said she wasn't their problem. Where's her mother? Died giving birth to her. Lily spent 3 years being passed from family to family, treated like a servant at best. Henry found her begging outside a saloon in Cheyenne. She was 6 years old, and she hadn't eaten in 4 days. Silas felt his jaw tighten. And Victor wanted to take all of them. Victor wanted to sell them. Clara's voice went cold. He had buyers lined up, mine owners, factory bosses, men who see children as cheap labor and nothing more. When Henry refused to hand them over, Victor... She stopped. Her hands were shaking. "You don't have to finish." "Yes, I do." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. "Victor shot my husband in the back while he was trying to protect us. He shot him like a dog, and then turned to me and said, 'You should have convinced him to be reasonable, sister.' And the wound in your leg? One of Victor's men, Abel Stone. He was supposed to kill me too, but his shot went wide. Might have been on purpose. I saw something in his eyes, doubt maybe. Guilt." She shook her head. "Doesn't matter. Victor will find someone else willing to do it." Silas handed her a cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed, and neither of them pulled away. "We need help," he said. "More than just me and a rifle." "Who would help us?" "The law believes Victor's lies. Anyone who knows the truth is too scared to speak. There's a preacher in town, Amos Blackwood. Been here 40 years, knows everyone's secrets." Silas paused. "And there's a woman, Eugenia Prescott, richest widow in 3 counties. She don't like me much, but she hates bullies more." "You think they'd stand against Victor Weston?" "Only one way to find out." The ride into town took 2 hours. Silas left Daniel in charge of the ranch with strict instructions. Anyone approaches, everyone goes to the cellar. No exceptions. No heroes. "I can handle a gun," Daniel protested. "I know you can. That's not the point." Silas put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "The point is, I need someone I trust watching over them. Can you do that?" Daniel straightened. "Yes, sir." "Good man." Clara insisted on coming despite her wound. "They need to see my face," she said. "They need to know I'm not the monster Victor made me out to be." They rode in silence through the frozen landscape, Clara sitting behind Silas on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist for balance. He tried not to think about how natural it felt. How right. Elkhorn Crossing was a small town built around a single muddy street. General store, blacksmith, saloon, and at the far end, a white-painted church with a steeple that reached toward heaven like a prayer. People stopped and stared as they rode in. Silas felt Clara tense behind him. He knew what she was seeing in their faces: suspicion, fear, the hungry curiosity of people who'd heard rumors and wanted to see the monster for themselves. "Keep your head up," he murmured. "Don't give them anything." They dismounted outside the church. The door opened before they could knock. Reverend Amos Blackwood was 70 years old with white hair and eyes that had seen too much sin to be shocked by anything. "Silas Brennan." His voice was a deep rumble. "Been a long time since you darkened my doorway. Been a long time since I had reason to reverend." Blackwood's eyes moved to Clara. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Or something deeper. "You'd better come inside." The church was cold, the pews empty. Blackwood led them to a small office in the back where a fire struggled against the chill. "I know who you are," he said to Clara. "And I know why you're here. Then you know I didn't kill my husband. I know the official story is a lie." Blackwood sat heavily in a worn chair. "I was traveling through Rawlins when it happened. Stopped at a trading post about 2 miles from your camp. I saw the whole thing." Clara's breath caught. "You were there." "Close enough to hear the shots. Close enough to see Victor Weston riding away while your husband bled out in the snow." The old man's hands trembled. "And may God forgive me. I was too scared to do anything about it." "You could have told someone. You could have." "Who would I tell Victor Weston has half the territory's judges in his pocket? He has politicians, lawmen. Anyone I approached would have gone straight to him, and I'd have ended up like your husband." Blackwood shook his head. "I am a coward, Mrs. Weston. A coward who convinced himself that silence was wisdom." "But you're telling us now," Silas said, "because you came to me. Because I've spent 6 weeks wrestling with my conscience, and I can't carry this weight anymore." The Reverend looked at Clara with rheumy eyes. "I am so sorry. For your husband. For your children. For everything you've suffered while I held my tongue." "Your sorrow doesn't help me." Clara's voice was hard. "What helps me is your testimony. Will you give it?" "In court. Wherever it matters." A long pause. Blackwood's face contorted with the weight of his decision. "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "Yes, I'll testify, whatever it costs." Clara let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for weeks. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Victor will learn of this. He'll come after me the same way he came after you." "Then we protect each other." Silas stood. "That's how this works. No one stands alone. There's someone else you need to talk to." Blackwood rose, moving toward the window. "Eugenia Prescott. She's been asking questions about Victor Weston ever since he arrived in town. Uncomfortable questions. I was planning to see her next. Be careful. Eugenia doesn't trust easily, and she has reason. Her husband was murdered by a business partner 15 years ago. Same pattern as your situation, wealthy man killed widow, blamed truth buried under money and influence." Blackwood paused. "She fought for justice and lost everything except her pride. Sounds like someone we need on our side. Sounds like someone who might shoot you before hearing you out. Tread carefully, Silas." Eugenia Prescott's house sat on a hill overlooking the town, a monument to old money and older grief. The woman who answered the door was 60 years old with silver hair pulled back severely and eyes that could cut through steel. "Mr. Brennan?" Her voice was frost. "I heard you were harboring a wanted criminal." "I'm harboring 6 orphaned children and the woman who saved them. The criminal part is Victor Weston's lie." "So everyone claims when they're accused. But she didn't close the door. What do you want?" 10 minutes of your time, that's all." Mrs. Prescott studied him for a long moment. Then her eyes moved to Clara, who stood behind him pale and trembling, but refusing to look away. 5 minutes. She stepped aside. "And if you're wasting my time, I'll have my ranch hands throw you off my property." The parlor was elegant and cold, every surface polished to a mirror shine. Mrs. Prescott didn't offer them seats. Talk. Clara stepped forward. My husband was Henry Weston, Victor's brother. 6 weeks ago, Victor shot him in the back because Henry refused to hand over the children we'd adopted. Victor wanted to sell them to mine owners and factories. When Henry said no, Victor killed him and blamed me. That's quite an accusation. It's the truth. I have 6 witnesses, the children themselves. And now I have Reverend Blackwood, who saw the whole thing. Something flickered in Mrs. Prescott's expression. Amos Blackwood is coming forward. He just agreed to testify. That old coward, I've been trying to get him to speak up about various crimes for 20 years. She looked at Clara with new interest. How did you manage it? I asked. A pause. Then, surprisingly, Mrs. Prescott laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but genuine. You've got spine, I'll give you that. She moved to a chair and sat gesturing for them to do the same. Tell me everything, from the beginning. Clara talked for nearly an hour. She told Mrs. Prescott about meeting Henry, about finding the children, about Victor's escalating demands. She told her about the murder, the flight, the bullet wound. She told her about stumbling into Silas's barn on the coldest night of the year. When she finished, Mrs. Prescott was quiet for a long time. My husband was killed by his business partner, she said finally. Everyone knew Frederick Marsh was guilty. Everyone. But he had money and connections, and I had nothing but the truth. The courts believed his lies. I spent 3 years fighting for justice and watched him walk free. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Mrs. Prescott leaned forward. Frederick Marsh died 5 years after the trial, thrown from his horse during a hunting accident. She smiled thinly. Some accidents are more accidental than others. Silas felt a chill run down his spine. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Brennan. I'm telling you that the courts don't always deliver justice. And when they fail, sometimes justice finds other ways. She stood abruptly. I'll help you. Not because I believe in the legal system, but because I despise men like Victor Weston. Bullies who use money and power to destroy anyone who stands in their way. What kind of help? Money for a start. Good lawyers don't come cheap, and you'll need the best if you're going against the Weston family. She moved to a desk and pulled out a checkbook. I'll also put out word among my contacts. Victor Weston isn't the only one with connections in this territory. By the time I'm finished, every judge from here to San Francisco will know what kind of man he really is. Why? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for strangers? Mrs. Prescott looked at her for a long moment. Because I see myself in you, Mrs. Weston. I see a woman who lost everything and refused to stop fighting. I see someone who deserves better than what this world has given her. She handed Clara a check. And because helping you might finally quiet the ghost that's haunted me for 15 years. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Clara sat behind Silas again, but this time her grip was different. Less desperate, more trusting. Thank you, she said, as they crested the final hill. For what? For believing me, for fighting for us, for... She stopped. For being the kind of man I thought didn't exist anymore. Silas didn't know how to respond, so he said nothing. They found the ranch exactly as they'd left it, the children tumbling out to meet them the moment they appeared. Did it work? Daniel demanded. Will they help us? They'll help. Silas dismounted and turned to lift Clara down. His hands lingered on her waist a moment longer than necessary. We're not alone anymore. That night after the children were asleep, Silas found Clara sitting by the fire again. She'd become a fixture there, a presence that filled the empty spaces he'd learned to live with. Can't sleep again. Too much thinking. She didn't look up as he sat beside her. I keep wondering what Henry would make of all this. Of you. What do you reckon he'd say? He'd say I found a good man. Clara finally turned to face him. He'd say the world isn't as dark as I thought it was. It's pretty dark. Yes, but there are lights in it. Her hand found his in the darkness. Unexpected lights. Silas felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Clara. I know. She squeezed his fingers. I know it's too soon. I know there's still Victor, still the trial, still 100 things that could go wrong. But I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm grateful. For everything. You don't need to be grateful. Yes, I do. Because 3 weeks ago, I was ready to die in your barn. I had given up on everything except keeping those children alive for one more day. And then you... Her voice broke. You reminded me that there are people worth living for, not just dying for. He couldn't help himself. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss against her knuckles. Whatever comes, he said, we face it together. All of us. That's a promise. The fourth morning brought trouble. Daniel came running from the ridge before breakfast, his face white. Riders coming? Different ones this time? Looks like law. Silas grabbed his rifle. How many? Just 2. One's got a star on his chest. Sheriff? He turned to Clara. Stay inside with the children. Don't come out unless I call for you. Silas? Please? She nodded reluctantly and gathered the children into the back room. Silas stepped onto the porch just as the riders appeared. He recognized Sheriff Cole Harrison immediately, a thick-necked man in his 50s with a silver star and tired eyes. Sheriff? Brennan. Harrison reined in his horse. We need to talk. About what? About the woman you're harboring. The sheriff's voice was carefully neutral. Victor Weston filed a formal complaint yesterday. Says you're sheltering a fugitive and 6 kidnapped children. Victor Weston is a liar and a murderer. That may be, but I've got paperwork that says otherwise. Harrison dismounted slowly, his hands visible. I ain't here to arrest anyone, Silas. I'm here to understand what the hell is going on. You want to understand? Come inside. Hear the truth from the people who lived it. That's exactly what I aim to do. Silas led the sheriff into the cabin. Clara was waiting, the children arranged behind her like a small army. Harrison looked at them for a long moment. Then he took off his hat. Mrs. Weston, I've heard a lot of stories about you in the past 6 weeks. Figure it's time I heard yours. Clara told him everything. The children added their pieces, Daniel describing the murder in stark, brutal detail. Ruth explaining how they'd been passed from family to family before Henry and Clara found them. Even little Lily spoke, her voice barely audible, telling the sheriff about her father's death and the years of being treated like garbage. When they finished, Harrison was silent. I believe you, he said finally. Clara's shoulders sagged with relief. You do. I've known Victor Weston's type my whole career. Rich men who think money makes them untouchable. The sheriff put his hat back on. Problem is, believing you and proving it are 2 different things. I've got sworn statements from 6 of Victor's men saying you killed your husband. I've got judges who've already issued warrants. Going against all that takes more than just my word. What about Reverend Blackwood? Silas asked. He's willing to testify that he witnessed the murder. Harrison's eyebrows rose. Amos Blackwood. The same man who's been too scared to stand up to anyone for 40 years. The same. Well, the sheriff scratched his chin. That changes things. If I can get Blackwood's testimony on record before Victor's lawyers find a way to silence him, we might have a chance. There's more. Silas told him about Mrs. Prescott's support, the money, the legal resources, the network of contacts. Harrison let out a low whistle. Eugenia Prescott. You've been busy, Brennan. We've been desperate. Desperate people either get killed or they win. Ain't much in between. The sheriff moved toward the door. I'm gonna do something I probably shouldn't. I'm gonna delay serving this warrant for as long as I can. Buy you time to build your case. But I need something in return. Name it. When Victor comes back, and he will come back, you don't go to war without telling me first. I ain't losing my town to a range war between a rancher and a millionaire. Fair enough. Harrison mounted his horse. One more thing. Victor's been hiring men. Lots of them. Word is, he's got 20 guns on his payroll now, maybe more. Whatever you're planning, you better do it fast. He rode away, leaving Silas standing on the porch with a cold knot of dread in his stomach. 20 men. He had a wounded woman, 6 children, an old preacher, and a bitter widow. This was going to be a hell of a fight. That night, Clara found him cleaning his rifle by the fire. How bad is it? Bad enough. Tell me. He told her about Victor's army, about the timeline, about the impossible odds they were facing. So we run, she said quietly. We take the children and we disappear. Start over somewhere Victor can't find us. You really think there's anywhere he can't find you, man like that, with his money and his connections? Silas shook his head. You'd spend the rest of your life running, looking over your shoulder, teaching those children to be afraid. Then what? We fight. Against 20 guns. Against a murderer. Against a man who thinks he can take whatever he wants because nobody's ever told him no. Silas set down his rifle. I didn't survive Antietam just to run from a bully in a fancy coat. And you didn't survive 6 weeks in the wilderness with a bullet in your leg just to give up now. What if we lose? Then we lose fighting. We lose on our feet, not on our knees. He reached out and took her hands. Clara, those children have spent their whole lives being told they're worthless, that they don't matter, that the world has no place for them. What kind of message do we send if we run? If we teach them that evil always wins? A realistic one. Maybe. But realistic ain't always right. He squeezed her fingers. Sometimes you gotta fight even when you're going to lose. Sometimes the fight itself is the victory. Clara stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. Then we fight. Her voice was steady now. Strong. All of us. Together. Together. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them quite understood. And in the other room, 6 children slept peacefully for the first time in months, dreaming of a world where good men stood up against evil. A world where they finally belonged. The week that followed was the longest of Silas's life. Every morning he woke before dawn and scanned the horizon for riders. Every night he slept with his rifle beside him, listening for hoofbeats that never came. The waiting was worse than any battle he'd ever fought. He's planning something. Clara stood beside him on the porch, her leg finally strong enough to bear her weight without pain. Victor never waits this long unless he's planning something terrible. Let him plan. We're ready. Are we? Silas looked out at what they'd built in 7 days. Daniel had organized the older children into a watch rotation. Ruth had stockpiled food and medical supplies. Even the twins had learned to load rifles, their small hands surprisingly steady. Mrs. Prescott had sent 3 of her ranch hands to help defend the property. Reverend Blackwood had moved into the barn, claiming he'd rather die fighting than hiding. Ready as we'll ever be, Silas said. That's not very reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. Clara almost smiled. Almost. The attack came on a Sunday morning. Daniel spotted them first, a column of riders appearing over the northern ridge like a dark wave rolling toward shore. They're here! His voice cracked as he ran toward the cabin. 20 men, maybe more. Victor's leading them. Silas grabbed his rifle. Everyone knows what to do. Daniel, get the little ones to the cellar. Ruth, you're with them. I can fight, Daniel protested. You taught me to shoot. You said I was good. You are good. That's why I need you protecting your family. Silas gripped his shoulder. This ain't about glory, son. It's about survival. You understand? Daniel's jaw tightened. Yes, sir. Go. The boy ran, gathering the younger children as he went. Jacob was crying. Josiah was silent, his face pale as milk. Lily clutched her rag doll so tight Silas thought it might tear. "Samuel, go with them," Clara ordered. "But now." The boy obeyed, throwing one last terrified look over his shoulder before disappearing into the cabin. Clara checked her pistol. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe less." "Then I have something to say." She turned to face him, and Silas saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Not fear, not desperation, something else entirely. "Whatever happens today, I need you to know. Don't." His voice was rough. "Don't say goodbye. We ain't dying today." "I wasn't going to say goodbye." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold against his stubbled cheek. "I was going to say thank you for making me remember what it feels like to hope." Before he could respond, she kissed him. It was brief, desperate, a promise and a prayer wrapped into one moment that ended far too soon. "Now let's go kill the man who murdered my husband." Mrs. Prescott's ranch hands had taken positions behind the water trough and the woodpile. Reverend Blackwood stood on the porch with a shotgun that looked older than he was. "You sure about this, Reverend?" Silas asked. "I've been a coward my whole life, Mr. Brennan. It's time I found out what courage feels like. Might feel like dying. Then at least I'll die standing up." Victor's riders stopped about 100 yards from the cabin. 23 men Silas counted, all armed, all watching their boss for the signal. Victor himself rode forward alone, his hands raised in mock surrender. "Mr. Brennan, I come in peace." Funny way of showing it. "I merely wanted to talk. Surely reasonable men can reach an understanding without violence." Victor's smile was a wound. "After all, there are children present. We wouldn't want them to see anything unpleasant. Only unpleasant thing they're gonna see is you riding away empty-handed." "I was hoping you'd be more cooperative." Victor sighed theatrically. "I've brought reinforcements, as you can see. 23 of my best men, all of them eager to earn their bonus. Bonus: $500 to the man who brings me Clara alive, 100 for each child." His eyes found Clara standing in the doorway. "Come now, sister. This doesn't have to end badly. Surrender yourself, give me the children, and I'll let your rancher friend live. Everyone wins. Everyone except the children you'll sell to slavers." Such an ugly word. I prefer investors in young labor. Victor's smile widened. "Final offer, Clara. Come with me now or I burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." Clara raised her pistol. "Go to hell." "I'll take that as a no." Victor wheeled his horse and galloped back toward his men. Silas heard him shouting orders, saw the riders spreading out to surround the property. "Here they come," Blackwood muttered. "Lord, give me strength." The first shot came from the left flank. One of Victor's men getting eager. It went wide, splintering wood somewhere behind Silas. Then everything exploded. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Silas fired, and worked the lever, fired, and worked the lever, each shot finding a target. Beside him, Clara's pistol cracked steadily, her aim truer than he'd expected. One of Mrs. Prescott's men went down, clutching his shoulder. Another took cover as bullets tore through the water trough. "They're flanking us," Blackwood shouted. 3 men coming around the barn." Silas spun and fired. 1 man dropped. The others dove for cover. "How many are down?" 4, maybe 5. Clara was reloading, her hands steady despite the chaos. "Not enough." "Keep shooting." A bullet sang past Silas's ear close enough to feel the heat. He ducked behind a post and took aim at a rider charging toward the porch. The man's horse screamed and went down. The rider flew over its head and didn't get up. "Victor's hanging back," Clara yelled. "He's letting his men do the dying. Coward knows we'd put a bullet in him first chance we got." The firefight continued. Minutes stretched into hours. Silas's arms ached from the rifle's kick. His ears rang from the constant gunfire, but still they came. Victor's men pressing closer and closer. "We're running low on ammunition." Blackwood's voice was hoarse. "Maybe 10 shots left." "Same here." Clara's face was grim. "Silas, we can't hold them forever." We don't have to hold them forever, just long enough. Long enough for what? Before Silas could answer, a new sound cut through the battle hoofbeats coming fast from the south. More of Victor's men. Clara's voice cracked. No. Silas felt something surge in his chest. Something that felt almost like hope. Look. A column of riders crested the southern ridge, 15-20, maybe more. And leading them, silver star gleaming in the winter sun, was Sheriff Cole Harrison. This is Sheriff Harrison. His voice boomed across the battlefield. By the authority of the Wyoming Territory, I order everyone to stand down. Now. Victor's men hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. Others looked toward their boss for guidance. Victor himself rode forward, his face twisted with rage. Sheriff, you're interfering in a private matter. This woman is a wanted fugitive. You're simply surrounded by 20 armed deputies who don't take kindly to rich men burning down ranches. Harrison's voice was ice. I said stand down. That wasn't a request. You can't do this. I have warrants. I have legal authority to. Your warrants are suspended pending investigation. Got word this morning from the territorial judge. Seems someone filed new evidence that puts your whole story in question. Harrison smiled grimly. Someone named Eugenia Prescott. Victor's face went pale. That meddling old... Careful now. Mrs. Prescott is a respected member of this community. And right now she's got the ear of every judge and politician from here to Denver. The sheriff rode closer, his hand resting on his pistol. Way I see it, you got two choices. Ride out now and face trial like a civilized man, or stay and face bullets like a criminal. The silence stretched like wire about to snap. Silas kept his rifle trained on Victor, waiting for the moment the man would snap and order his men to attack anyway. He'd seen that look before, the look of a man who'd rather die than lose. But Victor surprised him. This isn't over. His voice was quiet, dangerous. You hear me, Clara? This will never be over. I'll see you hang for Henry's murder, even if it takes the rest of my life. You'll have to find me first. Oh, I'll find you. Victor gathered his reins. I always find what belongs to me. He turned and rode away. One by one, his men followed until the field was empty, except for the bodies of the fallen and the echoes of gunfire fading into silence. Clara's legs gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the ground, pulling her against his chest, as the tension of the past hour finally released. It's over, he murmured into her hair. It's over. No. Her voice was muffled against his coat. You heard him. It'll never be over. He'll keep coming until one of us is dead. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, today, you're alive. The children are alive, and Victor Weston is riding away with his tail between his legs. He pulled back to look at her face. That's a victory, Clara. Take it. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she laughed. You're insane, you know that. Probably, but I ain't dead yet. Sheriff Harrison dismounted and walked toward them, his expression unreadable. Brennan, Mrs. Weston. Sheriff. Hell of a fight you put up here. He looked around at the bullet holes, the overturned barrels, the blood staining the snow. Lost any of your people? A few wounded, nobody dead. Lucky. Harrison turned his attention to Clara. Mrs. Weston, I need you to understand something. Victor's lawyers are already working to overturn the judge's suspension. What happened here today bought you time, but it didn't buy you safety. I know. There's going to be a trial. A real one with a real jury and real evidence. If you want any chance of winning, you're going to need more than just testimony from an old preacher and a rich widow. Harrison paused. You're going to need someone who was there. Someone who saw everything from Victor's side. You mean one of his men? I mean Abel Stone. Clara's breath caught. Abel Stone shot me. He also missed, a man who never misses, and somehow his bullet went wide. Harrison's eyes were steady. I've been watching Stone for weeks. Something's eating at him. Guilt maybe, conscience. Whatever it is, it's making him sloppy. You want me to trust the man who put a bullet in my leg? I want you to survive. And right now, Abel Stone might be the only chance you've got. The children emerged from the cellar like small ghosts, blinking in the sudden light. Is it over? Daniel asked. Did we win? For now. Silas knelt down to look him in the eye. You did good, son. Kept everyone safe, just like I asked. I wanted to fight. I know. And someday you will. But today protecting your family was the bravest thing you could do. Daniel's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. I was scared. So was I. Silas put a hand on his shoulder. Being scared and doing the right thing anyway, that's what courage really means. Ruth had already begun tending to the wounded one of Mrs. Prescott's men with a bullet graze on his arm, another with a gash on his forehead from flying debris. She moved with a competence that belied her 12 years. Where'd you learn to do that? Silas asked. Clara taught me. Ruth didn't look up from her bandaging. She said every woman should know how to heal because men are always finding new ways to hurt themselves. She ain't wrong. The little ones clustered around Clara, clinging to her skirt, her hands any part of her they could reach. Lily was crying silently. The twins had gone mute, their faces blank with shock. It's okay, Clara murmured, gathering them close. It's okay. The bad men are gone. We're safe. For how long? Samuel's voice was small but steady. They'll come back, won't they? Clara looked at Silas. He saw the question in her eyes, the same question Samuel had asked, the same question that haunted all of them. They might, Silas said. But we'll be ready. And this time, we won't be alone. That night after the wounds were bandaged, and the children were fed, and the damaged property surveyed, Silas sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and a mind that wouldn't stop racing. Clara found him there as she always seemed to find him. Can't sleep. Too much thinking. She sat beside him close enough that their shoulders touched. What are you thinking about? About what Sheriff Harrison said. About Abel Stone. The man who shot me. The man who missed. Silas turned to face her. Harrison's right. If Stone turns against Victor, we've got a chance. A real chance, not just survival. And if he doesn't turn, if he stays loyal, then we find another way. He took her hand. Clara, I've been fighting battles my whole life. Some I won, some I lost. But I never stopped fighting because the day you stop fighting is the day you start dying. That sounds exhausting. It is. He almost smiled. But it's also the only way I know how to live. Clara was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Henry was the opposite of you. He believed in the goodness of people. He thought if he was kind enough, gentle enough, the world would be kind back. She paused. It killed him. That belief killed him. Maybe. Or maybe it just wasn't enough against someone like Victor. And you think fighting is enough. I think fighting gives you a chance. I think rolling over and hoping the world will be kind is just a fancy way of giving up. He squeezed her hand. Your husband was a good man, Clara. But good men die when they won't fight for what they love. And you're willing to fight. I'm willing to die. The words came out before he could stop them. For you. For those children. For whatever this thing is we're building here. Clara turned to face him fully. Her eyes were bright with tears she'd been holding back for hours. I don't want you to die, Silas. I've already lost one man I love to Victor's violence. I can't... She stopped. Her face went pale. What did you say? His voice was rough. I said I can't lose another. No, before that. You said you loved Henry. I did love Henry. You said one man I loved, meaning there's another. Clara's eyes met his. In that moment, Silas saw everything: the fear, the hope, the desperate longing for something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. "There's another," she whispered. He kissed her. Not like before when the battle was coming, and they were saying what might have been goodbye. This was different. This was a beginning, not an ending. A promise of something neither of them had dared to hope for. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Well," Clara said, "that was unexpected." "Was it?" "No." She laughed, a real laugh this time. "No, I suppose it wasn't." The peace lasted exactly 6 hours. At dawn, one of the ranch hands came running from the ridge, his face white. "Rider coming. One man riding fast." Silas grabbed his rifle, but as the figure grew closer, he realized it wasn't one of Victor's men. It was Abel Stone. The gunslinger reined in his horse about 50 feet from the porch. His hands were empty, raised above his head. "Don't shoot." His voice was hoarse. "I ain't here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Clara stepped forward, her pistol drawn. "Come to finish what you started. I came to warn you." Stone's eyes were haunted. "Victor's gone to the territorial capital. He's got a judge there who owes him money. They're drawing up papers to have you declared an unfit guardian. All 6 children will be taken away and placed in Victor's custody." "He can't do that." "He's already doing it. Papers will be signed by tomorrow morning." Stone swallowed hard. "After that, it won't matter what evidence you have or who testifies. The children will legally belong to Victor, and anyone who tries to stop him will be charged with kidnapping." Clara's face went white. "No. No, that can't—" "Why are you telling us this?" Silas demanded. "You work for Victor. You shot this woman." "I work for money." Stone's voice cracked. "But there are some things money can't buy back. Some things that keep a man up at night staring at the ceiling wondering how he got so lost." "You're having a crisis of conscience now." "I've been having it for 6 weeks." Stone dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Ever since I watched Victor murder his brother in cold blood and then smile about it. I've killed men before, Mr. Brennan. Killed plenty. But I never killed an unarmed man who was just trying to protect his family. You could have stopped it. I could have died trying." Stone met Silas's eyes. "I'm not proud of what I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. But I'm here now, and I'm telling you the truth. Victor Weston is going to take those children tomorrow unless somebody stops him." Clara stepped forward. "How do we stop him?" "You need to get to the capital before the papers are signed. You need to present your case directly to the territorial governor." Stone paused. "I can get you inside. I know the back ways into the building. I know which guards can be bribed and which ones will shoot on sight." "Why should we trust you?" "You shouldn't." Stone's voice was flat. "But you don't have another choice. Either you trust me, and maybe save those children, or you don't trust me, and lose them for certain." Silas looked at Clara. She looked back at him. "We go," she said. "Tonight." "What about the children?" "They stay here, with Daniel and Ruth and whoever else we can trust to protect them." Her jaw tightened. "This is between Victor and me now. It's time we finished it." The plan came together quickly, too quickly. Silas thought for anything but desperation. He and Clara would ride through the night to reach the territorial capital before dawn. Abel Stone would guide them through the back passages of the government building. Mrs. Prescott would stay behind to protect the ranch, her remaining men forming a defensive perimeter. "If we're not back by noon tomorrow," Silas told Daniel, "take the children and go to Sheriff Harrison. He'll know what to do." "You're coming back." Daniel's voice was fierce. "You promised." "I'm going to try. Trying ain't good enough." The boy grabbed Silas's arm. "You said you don't break your promises, so promise me. Promise me you're coming back." Silas looked at this child, this boy who had lost everything, and still somehow found the strength to hope. "I promise." Clara said her goodbyes quietly, kneeling to embrace each child in turn. Lily clung to her neck and wouldn't let go. "Don't leave us," she whispered. "Please don't leave us." "I'm not leaving you, sweetheart. I'm fighting for you." Clara pulled back to look into her eyes. "Everything I do, everything I've ever done has been for you. All of you. You're my family now, and I will never stop fighting for my family." Ruth stepped forward, her face set with a determination that made her look far older than 12. "We'll take care of things here," she said. "You do what you have to do. You're incredible, Ruth. All of you. More incredible than any children I've ever known. That's because we had you." Ruth's voice cracked. "You taught us what it means to be loved." The ride through the darkness was cold and silent. Abel Stone led the way, his horse picking through the frozen landscape, with the sureness of a man who'd traveled these paths many times. Behind him, Silas and Clara rode side by side, their breath forming clouds in the icy air. "You really trust him?" Silas murmured. "No." Clara's eyes never left Stone's back. "But I trust that he wants redemption. Men who want redemption are predictable. They'll do almost anything to feel clean again. And if he's leading us into a trap, then we die fighting." She glanced at him. "That's still what you believe in, isn't it? Fighting to the end?" "It's the only thing I've ever believed in." They reached the territorial capital just as the first gray light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. "This way." Stone led them through back alleys and service entrances, past guards who looked the other way when he flashed a handful of coins. "The governor's office is on the 3rd floor. Victor will be there with his judge and whatever lawyers he's brought." "How many men?" 6, maybe 8. All armed, but they won't expect trouble inside the building. Victor thinks he's already won. "Then let's show him how wrong he is." They climbed the service stairs in silence, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage. Silas's heart pounded against his ribs. His hands were steady on his rifle. He'd faced death before. He could face it again. The governor's door was guarded by 2 men with shotguns. "Abel?" One of them frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Boss sent me to check on things." Stone's voice was casual. "He said there might be trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "This kind." Stone moved like lightning. Before either guard could react, he'd disarmed them both, his pistol pressed against one man's temple, while Silas covered the other. "Open the door," Stone said. Slowly. The door swung open to reveal a scene that made Silas's blood boil. Victor Weston stood beside a massive desk, a stack of papers spread before him. Behind the desk sat a portly man in judicial robes the corrupt Judge Stone had mentioned. And along the walls, 6 armed men watched with predatory eyes. "What is the meaning of this?" The judge's face went red. "This is a government building. You can't just—" "Shut up." Silas leveled his rifle at Victor. "We're here to have a conversation." Victor's face twisted through a dozen emotions before settling on cold fury. "Abel, I should have known. Treacherous dog. Takes one to know one." Stone kept his pistol trained on the guards. "These papers ain't getting signed, Victor. It's over." "Over?" Victor laughed. "You think this changes anything? I have witnesses who saw Clara kill my brother. I have warrants signed by legitimate authorities. I have the entire legal system of this territory behind me." "You have lies." Clara stepped forward, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You have money and power and corruption, but you don't have the truth. The truth is whatever I say it is." "Not anymore." A new voice came from behind them. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway, surrounded by territorial marshals, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes like ice. Eugenia Prescott. "Governor Mitchell received some very interesting documents this morning," she said. "Letters written in your own hand, Victor detailing your plans to murder your brother and sell those children to labor camps. Letters that were delivered to me by someone who knows exactly how you operate." Victor's face went white. Those letters were stolen from your safe by a housekeeper you thought too stupid to read. Mrs. Prescott smiled coldly. Martha Simmons sends her regards. She's been collecting evidence against you for 15 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. This is ridiculous. This is justice. Mrs. Prescott gestured to the marshals. Victor Weston, you're under arrest for the murder of Henry Weston. I suggest you don't resist. Victor looked around the room, at the marshals, at the guns pointed at his chest, at the judge who was already backing away and claiming ignorance. His face contorted with rage. You think this is over? He lunged toward Clara, a knife appearing in his hand from nowhere. Silas fired. The bullet caught Victor in the shoulder, spinning him around and slamming him against the wall. The knife clattered to the floor. It's over, Silas said quietly. It's finally over. Victor slumped to the ground, blood spreading across his expensive coat, his eyes burning with hatred that would never die. I'll see you in hell, he spat. Maybe. Clara stepped over him without a second glance. But not today. The marshals dragged Victor away, his blood leaving a trail across the polished floor. Clara watched him go, her face blank, her hands trembling at her sides. It's not over yet. Mrs. Prescott's voice cut through the silence. The arrest is just the beginning. There will be a trial. Victor's lawyers will fight every piece of evidence we have. Let them fight. Clara's voice was hollow. I've been fighting for 6 weeks. I can fight a little longer. Can you? Mrs. Prescott stepped closer, her eyes searching Clara's face. Because what comes next will be worse than anything Victor's men could do with guns. They're going to tear your life apart in that courtroom. Every mistake you've ever made, every secret you've ever kept, they'll use it all against you. I don't have secrets. Everyone has secrets, Mrs. Weston. The question is whether yours are worth dying for. The ride back to the ranch took twice as long as the journey out. Silas pushed the horses as hard as he dared, but exhaustion was catching up with all of them. Clara swayed in her saddle, barely conscious. Abel Stone rode in silence, his face unreadable. You saved us back there. Silas didn't look at Stone as he spoke. I ain't sure why, but you did. I told you, some things money can't buy back. That ain't enough of an answer. Stone was quiet for a long moment. I had a sister once, Rose. She was 7 years younger than me, sweet as sugar, never hurt anyone in her life. His voice cracked. She got sick when she was 12. Fever took her in 3 days. I wasn't there when she died. I was off drinking and gambling, wasting my life on things that didn't matter. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was 20 years ago. Stone's jaw tightened. But when I saw those children at Victor's camp, when I heard him talking about selling them like cattle, I kept thinking about Rose, about what would have happened to her if she'd lived, and I hadn't been there to protect her. So you missed on purpose. I aimed for Mrs. Weston's leg instead of her heart. Told myself it was an accident that my hand slipped. Stone shook his head. But I knew. Deep down, I knew I couldn't do it. Couldn't be the man who killed a mother in front of her children. They're not her children, not by blood. Blood don't make family, Mr. Brennan. You of all people should know that. The children were waiting on the porch when they arrived. Daniel spotted them first and came running, his face wild with relief and fear and 100 other emotions he was too young to process. You're alive! His voice cracked. You're alive, you're... Clara dismounted and caught him in her arms. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. We heard about Victor. Daniel pulled back his eyes, searching her face. Is it true? Is he really arrested? It's true. Does that mean it's over? Clara looked at Silas. He saw the weight of everything still to come in her eyes. Not yet, she said softly, but soon. The other children crowded around each one, needing to touch Clara to confirm that she was real, that she hadn't been taken from them like everyone else they'd ever loved. Lily pressed her face against Clara's stomach and wouldn't let go. The twins grabbed her hands, one on each side, Samuel stood back, trying to look brave, but his lower lip was trembling. "I thought you weren't coming back." Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. "When the sun came up and you weren't here, I thought, I will always come back." Clara knelt down to look Ruth in the eye. "Do you hear me? I will always, always come back for you, no matter what. Promise. Promise." The trial was set for 3 weeks later. 3 weeks of preparation. 3 weeks of depositions and witness statements and legal maneuvering that made Silas's head spin. Mrs. Prescott had hired the best lawyers in the territory, 2 men from Denver, who charged more per hour than Silas earned in a month. The prosecution's case is strong. The lead attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Harrison Wells, explained during one of their strategy sessions. "We have Reverend Blackwood's eyewitness testimony. We have Martha Simmons's letters. We have Abel Stone's willingness to testify against his former employer. But Victor's lawyers are good. They'll try to discredit every single witness." "How?" Clara asked. "Blackwood is old. They'll say his eyesight is failing, his memory is unreliable. Martha Simmons was a disgruntled employee who was fired for theft. That's the story Victor's been spreading for years. And Stone is a hired gun who's been paid to switch sides. None of that is true. Truth doesn't always win in court, Mrs. Weston. What wins is perception. And right now Victor Weston is perceived as a wealthy, respected businessman who was wrongfully accused by his brother's scheming widow. Then we change the perception. That's exactly what we're going to do." Wells spread a stack of papers across the table. "We're going to tell a story. Not just the facts of what happened, but the story of who you are and why you did what you did. We're going to make that jury see you as a mother protecting her children, not a criminal fleeing justice. I am a mother protecting her children." Then we make sure the jury believes it. The days blurred together. Clara spent hours with the lawyers going over her testimony, preparing for cross-examination. Silas trained Daniel and the older children in ranch work, trying to keep them busy enough that they wouldn't think about what was coming. At night, after everyone else was asleep, Clara would find Silas by the fire. They would talk sometimes. Other times, they would just sit together in comfortable silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. "I'm scared." Clara's voice was barely audible. "I've never been so scared in my life. Not even when Victor's men were shooting at us. That was different. That was simple fight or die. This is—" She shook her head. "What if they don't believe me? What if the jury looks at those children and decides they're better off with Victor? What if I've put them through all of this for nothing? Then we find another way." Silas took her hand. "We appeal. We fight. We don't stop until those children are safe." "What if there's no other way?" "There's always another way. As long as we're breathing, there's another way." Clara turned to face him. "Why do you believe in me so much? You've known me for 8 weeks? You have no reason to trust anything I've said." "I've got every reason." Silas reached up and touched her face. "I've seen you take a bullet and keep running. I've seen you face down 20 armed men without flinching. I've seen you love 6 children who weren't yours like they were your own flesh and blood. That's not acting, Clara. That's not lies. That's who you are. You don't know who I am." "I know enough." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. "I know you're the bravest woman I've ever met. I know you've given those children something they've never had before, a reason to hope. And I know that whatever happens in that courtroom, I'm going to be right beside you every single minute. Why? Because I love you." The words came out before he could stop them, before he could decide whether they were wise or foolish or something in between. "I love you, Clara. God help me, I think I've loved you since the moment you pointed that gun at me in my barn." Clara stared at him. Tears were streaming down her face. "Say something," he whispered. "I love you too." Her voice broke. "I didn't think I could ever love anyone again after Henry. I didn't think my heart had anything left to give. But you, He kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper, all the fear and hope and desperate longing of the past weeks pouring out in a single moment that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Marry me," Silas said. "What? Marry me. Not now, not tomorrow, but when this is over. When Victor is behind bars and those children are legally yours and we can start living instead of just surviving." He gripped her hands. "I know it's crazy. I know we've known each other for 2 months. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Clara laughed through her tears. "You are crazy." "Is that a yes?" "It's a, ask me again after the trial." She kissed him again, quick and fierce. "But for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be yes." The trial began on a Tuesday morning. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing 3 deep along the walls. Clara walked in with her head held high, Silas beside her, the children following in a solemn line behind them. "All rise." Judge Margaret Hayes entered, a surprise that had thrown Victor's lawyers into a panic. Hayes was known throughout the territory as incorruptible, the kind of judge who couldn't be bought or intimidated or swayed by anything except evidence. "This court is now in session. The Territory of Wyoming versus Victor Jonathan Weston, charged with murder in the first degree and conspiracy to commit human trafficking." Hayes's voice was ice. "How does the defendant plead?" Victor rose immaculate in his expensive suit, his wounded shoulder hidden beneath careful tailoring. "Not guilty, Your Honor." "Very well. Prosecution, you may begin." Harrison Wells stood and addressed the jury. His voice was calm, measured, almost conversational. "Ladies and gentlemen, the defense is going to tell you a story. They're going to tell you that Clara Weston is a murderer, a kidnapper, a woman so consumed by greed that she killed her own husband to get his money. It's a compelling story. It's dramatic. It's exactly the kind of story that Victor Weston has been spreading for the past 2 months. He paused, letting the silence stretch. "But it's a lie." Wells walked slowly in front of the jury box, making eye contact with each member in turn. "The truth is simpler and more tragic. Henry Weston was a good man, a kind man, a man who saw children suffering and couldn't turn away. He and his wife Clara took in 6 orphans children who had been abandoned, abused, left to die by a world that didn't care about them. They gave those children a home, a family, hope. And Victor Weston couldn't stand it." Wells turned to face the defendant. Victor wanted those children for himself, not to love them, not to care for them, but to sell them, to labor camps, to factories, to anyone who would pay for young bodies and ask no questions. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. When Henry refused, Victor murdered him in cold blood, shot him in the back in front of his wife and 6 terrified children. Then he put a bounty on Clara's head and chased her across 3 territories, determined to silence the only witnesses to his crime. Wells returned to his seat. "Over the next few days, you're going to hear from those witnesses. You're going to hear the truth, the real truth, not the story Victor Weston has been paying people to believe. And when you've heard it all, I'm confident you'll see what we see: a murderer who must face justice." The defense attorney, a silver-tongued man named Prescott, no relation to Eugenia, rose with a confident smile. "Members of the jury, the prosecution wants you to believe in fairy tales, evil villains and innocent victims, good versus evil. But real life isn't that simple." He walked toward Clara, stopping just a few feet from where she sat. Clara Weston inherited everything when her husband died. Everything. The money, the property, the business interests, all of it. A fortune worth over $200,000. He let that number hang in the air. "That's quite a motive, wouldn't you say? My client is a grieving brother, wrongfully accused by a woman who had every reason to want her husband dead. The witnesses the prosecution will call are an old man with failing eyesight, a bitter former employee, and a hired gun who's been paid to switch sides. Is that really enough to convict a man of murder?" He returned to his seat. "I don't think so. And I don't think you will either. The first witness was Reverend Amos Blackwood. The old man took the stand slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Reverend Blackwood. Wells began. Can you tell the court what you witnessed on the afternoon of October 15th, 1879? I was traveling from Rollins to Helena. My route took me past a campsite where I saw a group of riders surrounding a wagon. I stopped to observe from a distance. What did you see? I saw Victor Weston and approximately 6 armed men. They had surrounded Henry Weston, his wife Clara, and 6 children. There was an argument. Could you hear what was said? Victor was demanding that Henry hand over the children. He said they belonged to him now that Henry had no right to them. Henry refused. He said the children were human beings, not property. And then, Blackwood's voice dropped. Victor drew his pistol and shot Henry in the back. Henry was turning away, trying to shield his wife. He wasn't armed. He wasn't threatening anyone. Victor simply executed him. What happened next? One of Victor's men shot Mrs. Weston. She was hit in the leg. There was chaos. Some of the men seemed to object to shooting a woman and children. In the confusion, Clara gathered the children and fled. And you didn't come forward immediately. Why? Blackwood's face contorted with shame. I was afraid. Victor Weston is a powerful man. I convinced myself that no one would believe me, that speaking up would only get me killed. I was a coward. What changed your mind? Mr. Silas Brennan and Mrs. Weston came to see me. They asked for my help. And I realized that being afraid wasn't an excuse anymore. Those children deserved someone willing to tell the truth. The cross-examination was brutal. Prescott approached the witness stand like a predator circling wounded prey. Reverend Blackwood, how old are you? 72. And how is your eyesight? Not what it used to be. In fact, haven't you been known to mistake strangers for friends? Haven't you been unable to read without spectacles for over a decade? My distance vision is still adequate. Adequate. Prescott smiled thinly. You claim to have witnessed this execution. From how far away? Perhaps 200 yards. 200 yards. That's quite a distance for a man with adequate vision. He let the sarcasm drip. Isn't it possible, Reverend, that what you saw was an argument that escalated into tragedy? A confrontation where both brothers drew weapons and Henry was simply slower? No, Henry wasn't armed. You could see that clearly from 200 yards with your adequate vision. Blackwood's jaw tightened. I know what I saw. Do you? Or do you know what you've convinced yourself you saw after months of guilt and pressure from Mrs. Weston and her allies? Objection! Wells rose. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Judge Hayes fixed Prescott with a cold look. Move on, counselor. The second day brought Martha Simmons to the stand. The former housekeeper was a small woman, plain and forgettable, exactly the kind of person wealthy men overlooked. She'd worked in the Weston household for 15 years before Victor fired her for theft, a charge she'd always denied. Mrs. Simmons. Wells said, Can you tell the court about the documents you provided to the prosecution? They're letters written by Victor Weston. I found them in his study one night while I was cleaning. They detail his plans to murder his brother and take control of the family business. How do you know Victor wrote them? I recognize his handwriting. I served that household for 15 years. I know his writing as well as I know my own. Why did you keep these letters secret for so long? I was afraid. Victor found out I'd seen something I shouldn't have. He fired me and spread rumors that I was a thief. No one would hire me. I lost everything. Her voice cracked. I've been waiting 15 years for a chance to make things right. The cross-examination focused on her credibility. Mrs. Simmons, isn't it true that you were fired for stealing silverware from the Weston household? That's what Victor claimed. It wasn't true. So you say. But the fact remains that you have every reason to want revenge against the man who ruined your life. Don't you? I want justice. That's not the same thing, isn't it? Prescott held up the letters. These documents conveniently appeared just when Mrs. Clara Weston needed them most. Isn't it possible that you fabricated them to help destroy the man you blame for your misfortune? I didn't fabricate anything. Can you prove that? Martha's face went pale. The handwriting. Handwriting can be forged, Mrs. Simmons, especially by someone who spent 15 years nursing a grudge. The third day belonged to Abel Stone. The former gunslinger walked to the witness stand like a man going to his own execution. His face was gaunt, his eyes haunted. Whatever peace he'd found in his decision to testify, it wasn't visible today. Mr. Stone, Wells began. You were employed by Victor Weston for approximately 2 years. Is that correct? Yes. And in that time you participated in various activities on his behalf. I was a hired gun. I did what I was paid to do. Including the attack on Henry and Clara Weston's camp. Yes. Can you tell the court what you witnessed that day? Stone took a deep breath. Victor told us we were going to retrieve his brother's wife and some children she'd kidnapped. He said Henry had been manipulated, that Clara was dangerous. When we got to the camp, Victor confronted Henry. They argued. Henry said he wouldn't hand over the children, that they weren't property. And then, Victor shot him. Stone's voice was flat. Henry was turning away. He wasn't armed. Victor just pulled the trigger. What happened next? I was ordered to shoot Clara. Victor wanted all the witnesses dead. Stone paused. I missed on purpose. Hit her in the leg instead of the chest. Told Victor my hand slipped. Why? Because I couldn't do it. Stone's voice cracked. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of, but I couldn't murder a woman in front of her children. I couldn't be that man. The cross-examination was vicious. Mr. Stone, how much is Mrs. Prescott paying you to testify? Nothing. Nothing? A man who's been a hired gun his whole life suddenly develops a conscience for free. I'm not being paid. Then why are you here? Why would a man with your history risk everything to help a woman he barely knows? Stone looked at the jury. Because some things matter more than money. Because I have to live with what I've done, and this is the only way I know to make it right. How touching. Prescott's voice dripped with sarcasm. The reformed killer seeking redemption. Tell me, Mr. Stone, how many men have you killed in your career? I don't know. You don't know, a dozen, 2 dozen more. I stopped counting. And we're supposed to believe that this man, this self-confessed murderer, has suddenly decided to tell the truth, after years of lying, stealing, and killing for money. Believe what you want. Stone's eyes were dead. I know what I saw. I know what I did. And I know that Victor Weston murdered his brother in cold blood. The fourth day was Daniel's turn. Clara had argued against it. She'd begged the lawyers to leave him out of it, to spare him the trauma of reliving the worst day of his life in front of strangers. He's just a boy, she'd pleaded. He's been through enough. He's also your strongest witness, Wells had replied gently. A child who saw everything, who has no reason to lie. If anyone can convince that jury, it's him. Daniel walked to the stand with his shoulders squared and his jaw set. He was 14 years old, but in that moment he looked older, ancient, like a man who'd already lived a lifetime of sorrow. Daniel. Wells said, his voice soft. I know this is hard. Just tell us what you remember. Take your time. I remember everything. Daniel's voice was steady. I remember Mr. Henry telling us to stay behind him. I remember the horses coming over the hill. I remember Victor's voice, how calm he was, like he was discussing the weather. What did Victor say? He told Mr. Henry to hand us over. He said we belonged to him now. Mr. Henry said no. He said we weren't property, that we had rights, that we deserved to choose our own lives. And then, Victor laughed. He said Mr. Henry had always been too soft, too weak. Daniel's voice cracked. Then he said, "If you won't give them to me, brother, you're no use to anyone." And he shot him. Mr. Henry wasn't armed. No, sir. He'd turned to make sure Mrs. Clara was behind him. He was trying to protect her. Victor shot him in the back. What happened after that? One of Victor's men shot Mrs. Clara. She fell. We all started screaming. Some of Victor's men were arguing they didn't want to kill women and children. Mrs. Clara grabbed my hand and told me to get the others. So you ran. We ran. Daniel's eyes filled with tears he refused to let fall. We ran, and we didn't stop. For days. Mrs. Clara was bleeding and sick, but she wouldn't give up. She kept telling us we had to keep moving, that Victor would find us if we stopped. She protected you. She saved us. Daniel looked directly at Clara. All of us. She could have left us behind. She could have run faster alone. But she wouldn't. She said we were family now, and family doesn't leave anyone behind. The cross-examination started gentle, but it didn't stay that way. Daniel, you've been living with Mrs. Weston for several months now. Is that correct? Yes, sir. And in that time, has she ever talked to you about what you would say in court? She told me to tell the truth. Just the truth. Nothing more specific. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that a woman facing murder charges might have reason to coach her witnesses, especially young impressionable witnesses who depend on her for everything. Mrs. Clara didn't coach me. She didn't have to. Daniel's voice rose. I was there. I saw what happened. I watched Victor Weston murder the only man who ever treated me like I was worth something. Daniel. I'm not finished. The boy was shaking now, but not from fear. From rage. You want to talk about what I've been through? Fine. Let's talk. My whole family died of cholera when I was 10. I spent 2 years on the streets, starving, stealing, doing whatever I had to do to survive. Then Mr. Henry and Mrs. Clara found me. They took me in. They gave me a home. I understand you've had a difficult... You don't understand anything. Daniel stood up, ignoring the judge's warning look. Mr. Henry died protecting us. He died because he believed we mattered. And now you're trying to twist that into something ugly, something dirty, because Victor Weston has enough money to pay for lies. Sit down, young man. No. Daniel turned to face the jury directly. I don't care what his lawyers say. I don't care what stories they make up. I know what I saw. I know who killed Mr. Henry. And I know that Mrs. Clara has never done anything except love us and fight for us, and nearly die trying to keep us safe. The courtroom was silent. Judge Hayes cleared her throat. The witness will sit down. Daniel sat. Prescott opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the jury, at the tears on several faces, the anger on others. No further questions. That night, Clara found Daniel sitting alone behind the barn. I'm sorry, he said before she could speak. I shouldn't have lost my temper. I probably ruined everything. You didn't ruin anything. Clara sat beside him in the cold grass. You told the truth. That's all anyone can do. But what if it's not enough? What if they still believe Victor's lies? Then we find another way. Clara put her arm around his shoulders. Daniel, listen to me. Whatever happens in that courtroom, you need to know something. I am so proud of you. Prouder than I've ever been of anyone. Why? Because you're the bravest person I've ever met. Because you've faced things that would break most grown men, and you're still standing. Because you stood up in front of all those people and told the truth even when it hurt, even when you were terrified. I wasn't terrified. Yes, you were. I could see it. She pulled him closer. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the right thing anyway. That's what you did today, Daniel. You did the right thing. The boy leaned against her, and for a moment he was just a child again. A child who needed his mother. I love you, he whispered. You know that, right? I know. Clara kissed the top of his head. I love you too. All of you. More than anything in this world. They sat together until the stars came out, mother and son waiting for the verdict that would decide their fate. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days of pacing, 3 days of sleepless nights, 3 days of watching the children's faces grow more haunted with each passing hour. "What's taking so long?" Ruth asked on the second morning. "If they believed us, wouldn't they have decided by now?" "Juries are complicated." Clara tried to keep her voice steady. "They have to consider all the evidence. It takes time." "What if they don't believe us? Then we'll figure something out." "What if there's nothing to figure out?" Ruth's voice cracked. "What if Victor wins and they take us away and we never see you again?" Clara pulled the girl into her arms. "That's not going to happen." "You can't promise that." "No, I can't." Clara held her tighter. "But I can promise that no matter what happens, I will never stop fighting for you. Never. Do you hear me?" Ruth nodded against her chest, but Clara could feel her trembling. Silas found Clara alone on the porch that night, staring at nothing. "You should sleep." "Can't." "You've barely eaten in 3 days." "Not hungry." He sat beside her and took her hand. "Clara, whatever happens tomorrow." "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't tell me it's going to be okay. Don't tell me we did everything we could. Don't give me comfort I don't deserve." "What do you deserve then?" "I don't know." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were hollow. "I keep thinking about Henry, about what he would say if he could see all of this. The trial, the children, you. What do you reckon he'd say? He'd say I should have faith. That truth always wins in the end." She laughed bitterly. "Henry believed in a world that doesn't exist, a world where good people are rewarded and bad people are punished. He believed right up until the moment Victor put a bullet in his back." "Maybe he was right." "How can you say that? After everything you've seen?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. "When I came home from the war, I was broken. Couldn't sleep without seeing the faces of men I'd killed. Couldn't eat without tasting blood. Couldn't look at my wife without wondering how long it would be before God took her too." "What changed?" "Nothing. Everything." He squeezed her hand. "Sarah got sick. Died in my arms while I begged God to take me instead. And for 3 years after that I lived like a dead man. Went through the motions. Ate, slept, worked. But there was nothing inside. Nothing worth living for. And then I showed up in your barn. And then you showed up in my barn." He turned to face her. "With a bullet in your leg, and 6 children behind you, and a gun pointed at my chest. And something happened. Something I can't explain. I looked at you, at this bleeding, terrified, desperate woman, and I thought, she's still fighting. After everything she's been through, she's still fighting. That's not faith. That's stubbornness. Maybe they're the same thing." Silas lifted her hand to his lips. "Clara, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know if the jury will see the truth, or if Victor's money will buy him another lie. But I know this: I've spent 3 years waiting to die. And now, for the first time since I buried Sarah, I want to live." "Why?" "Because of you. Because of those children. Because I finally found something worth fighting for." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together. That's all I can promise. But it's everything I have." Clara closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too." They sat together until dawn, holding hands, waiting for the verdict that would decide their fate. The courthouse was packed when they arrived. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls 3 deep. Clara walked through the crowd with her head held high. Silas on one side, the children following behind in a solemn procession. Daniel walked at the rear, his shoulders squared like a soldier going into battle. "All rise." Judge Hayes entered and took her seat. Her face was unreadable. "The jury has reached a verdict. Foreman, please stand." A middle-aged man in a worn suit rose from the jury box. His hands were shaking slightly as he held the paper. On the charge of murder in the first degree, how does the jury find? The foreman's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. Clara's knees buckled. Silas caught her before she hit the floor, pulling her against his chest as the noise washed over them like a wave. Guilty, she whispered. Guilty. It's over. His voice was rough with emotion. Clara, it's over. But it wasn't over yet. Victor Weston rose from the defendant's table, his face twisted with rage. Before anyone could stop him, he lunged toward Clara, grabbing a bailiff's pistol in one fluid motion. If I can't have them, no one will. The shot cracked through the chaos. Clara screamed. But it wasn't Victor who fell. Abel Stone had thrown himself between the gun and Clara, taking the bullet meant for her heart. He crumpled to the ground, blood spreading across his chest. Abel. Clara dropped to her knees beside him. Abel, no. Worth it. Stone's voice was barely a whisper. Finally did something right. The bailiffs tackled Victor to the ground. The courtroom descended into pandemonium, but Clara didn't notice any of it. All she could see was the man who had once shot her, who had betrayed his employer to save her, who was now dying in her arms. Hold on, she begged. Please, just hold on. Take care of those kids. Stone's eyes were going glassy. Give them what I never had. Abel. A family. He smiled, blood staining his teeth. That's all anyone really wants, isn't it? His eyes closed. Clara held him as he died, this stranger who had become something more. This enemy who had become an ally. This broken man who had found redemption in his final moments. He's gone. Silas's voice was gentle. Clara, he's gone. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. He saved my life. I know. He didn't have to. After everything he'd done, he didn't have to save me. But he did. Silas helped her to her feet. That's what matters. That's what he'd want you to remember. The sentencing came 3 days later. Victor Weston stood before Judge Hayes, his wrists in chains, his expensive suit replaced by prison grays. The arrogance that had defined him throughout the trial was gone. In its place was something hollow, empty, the shell of a man who had lost everything. Victor Jonathan Weston, you have been found guilty of murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit human trafficking and attempted murder in the second degree. Judge Hayes's voice was ice. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to death by hanging to be carried out no later than 30 days from this date. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Do you have anything to say before sentence is pronounced? Victor raised his head. His eyes found Clara's across the room. I want you to know, he said slowly, that I don't regret any of it. Henry was weak. He chose orphans and a scheming wife over his own blood. He deserved what he got. Is that all? That's all. Victor's lips twisted into a smile that made Clara's blood run cold. But I want Clara to remember something. Every time she looks at those children, every time she thinks about her precious family, I want her to remember that I took Henry from her. I put that bullet in his back, and nothing, not this trial, not this sentence, not the rope they're going to put around my neck will ever change that. Judge Hayes's expression didn't flicker. Victor Weston, you are hereby remanded to custody pending execution. May God have mercy on your soul. The bailiffs led him away. Clara watched him go, this monster who had haunted her nightmares for months. And she felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just a hollow emptiness where her fear used to live. It's over, Silas said quietly. Truly over this time. Is it? Clara's voice was distant. Henry's still dead. Abel's still dead. Nothing that happened in this courtroom changes any of that. No, but those children are safe. You're safe, and Victor Weston will never hurt anyone again. Clara closed her eyes. I keep waiting to feel something. Joy, relief, vindication. But all I feel is tired. That's grief. Silas took her hand. It doesn't go away just because justice is served, but it gets lighter. Day by day, year by year, it gets lighter. How do you know? Because I've been carrying it for 3 years, and for the first time since Sarah died, I can feel it starting to lift. The wedding was held 3 weeks later. Not a grand affair, just the family gathered beneath the cottonwood trees on Silas's ranch. Pastor Blackwood presided, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Mrs. Prescott sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Sheriff Harrison stood guard at the property line, though there was no longer any threat to guard against. And the children, the 6 beautiful, broken, miraculous children, stood in a row behind Clara and Silas, their faces shining with something that looked almost like hope. Do you, Silas Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Clara Weston, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Clara looked at Silas, this stranger who had become her salvation, this widower who had opened his door to a bleeding woman and 7 terrified children, this man who had fought for her, killed for her, nearly died for her. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Blackwood smiled. You may kiss the bride. Silas pulled her into his arms and kissed her. The children cheered. Mrs. Prescott burst into tears. Even Sheriff Harrison was seen wiping his eyes. I love you, Mrs. Brennan, Silas murmured against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Brennan. Clara pulled back to look at him. Now let's go start the rest of our lives. The adoption papers were signed the following month. 6 children legally and officially the children of Silas and Clara Brennan. 6 orphans who had found a home. 6 lost souls who had finally found a family. Does this mean you're really our parents now? Lily asked, clutching her rag doll to her chest. It means we've always been your parents, Clara said, kneeling to look her in the eye. The papers just make it official. What's official mean? It means no one can ever take you away from us. Ever. Lily threw her arms around Clara's neck. I love you, Mama. The word hit Clara like a physical blow. Mama. Not Mrs. Clara. Not Mrs. Weston. Mama. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. The twins came next, demanding their share of hugs. Then Samuel, then Ruth, then Daniel, even Daniel, who at 14 considered himself too old for such things, but couldn't quite resist. Silas stood back and watched, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You did good, Mrs. Prescott said, appearing at his elbow. All of you. Couldn't have done it without you. Nonsense. I just provided the money. She patted his arm. The courage was all yours. And the children's. And the children's. Mrs. Prescott was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what Clara said during the trial. About the children who are still out there. The ones who have no one to fight for them. What about them? Someone should do something. Her eyes met his. Someone should give them what you've given these 6. A home. A family. A chance. That's a big undertaking. It is. But I have money and no one to leave it to. And you have land and a heart big enough to love strangers. She paused. What do you say, Mr. Brennan, interested in saving a few more children? Silas looked at Clara, at the family they'd built from nothing. At the love that had grown from tragedy. I reckon we might be. Haven Ranch was established the following spring. It started small, just a few additional buildings, a schoolhouse, a dormitory that could hold 12 children at most. But word spread quickly. Within months, they were receiving letters from all over the territory. Orphanages that couldn't handle their load. Sheriffs who'd found abandoned children. churches that had taken in strays they couldn't keep. "We need more space," Clara said one morning, poring over the accounts. "More beds, more teachers, more everything." "We'll build it." "With what money?" "We'll find it." Silas put his hand over hers. "We always do." Mrs. Prescott's donation came through a week later enough to triple the size of Haven Ranch and hire a full staff. With it came a letter. "Consider this my legacy," she wrote. "When I'm gone, I want the world to know that I did something that mattered, something that outlasted me. You've given me that gift, Clara. You and Silas and those remarkable children. Thank you." The first orphan to arrive at Haven Ranch was a boy named William. He was 7 years old, found wandering the streets of Cheyenne after his parents died in a fire. He came clutching a tin soldier, the only thing he'd saved from the blaze, his eyes wide with the particular terror of a child who has learned that the world is not a safe place. Clara met him at the door. "Hello, William. My name is Clara. Welcome to Haven Ranch." The boy stared at her. "Are you going to hurt me?" "No, sweetheart. No one here is going to hurt you, ever." "That's what the last people said." Clara knelt down to his level. "I know you're scared. I know you've been through terrible things, but I want you to know something. See those children over there?" William looked. Daniel was teaching Samuel to rope a fence post. Ruth was helping the twins plant a garden. Lily was drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick. They were all like you once, scared, alone, convinced that no one in the world cared about them. But now they're a family. My family. And if you'll let us, we'd like you to be part of our family too. Why? Because everyone deserves to be loved, William, even when the world tells them they don't. The boy stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try." That's all anyone can ask. The years passed like water through fingers. Haven Ranch grew. First a dozen children, then 24, then more. Buildings sprouted across the property: dormitories, schoolhouses, workshops, barns. Staff came and went, but the mission remained the same: give homeless children a home. Give lost souls a family. Give hopeless hearts a reason to hope. Daniel grew into a young man strong and capable and wise beyond his years. At 18, he began working alongside Silas, helping to run the ranch and train the older children in the skills they'd need to survive on their own. "You could leave, you know," Silas told him one evening. "Go to college, see the world. You don't have to stay here." "I know." Daniel looked out at the children playing in the yard, a scene that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. "But this is where I belong. These are my people, my family." "You sound like your mother." Daniel smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." Ruth became a teacher, her natural gift for healing finding expression in a different kind of medicine, the medicine of knowledge, of patience, of gentle guidance. She taught the youngest children to read, to write, to believe in themselves. Samuel went east to study law, determined to become the kind of advocate who would fight for children like him, children who had no one else to fight for them. He wrote letters home every week, each one filled with stories of his studies and dreams for the future. Lily discovered art. Her drawings, once simple sketches in the dirt, became paintings that hung in galleries across the territory. She used the money from her sales to fund scholarships for Haven Ranch children who wanted to continue their education. The twins, Jacob and Josiah, became inseparable partners in a livestock business that supplied half the ranches in Wyoming. They never married, content to live together on the property, where they'd first learned what it meant to be safe. And through it all, Clara and Silas remained at the center. Older, now grayer, slower, but no less devoted to the work they'd started, no less committed to the family they'd built. "I've been thinking," Clara said one evening, sitting beside Silas on the porch where they'd sat 1,000 times before, "about everything that's happened, everything that led us here." "What about it?" If Victor hadn't done what he did, if Henry hadn't died, none of this would exist. Haven Ranch, the children we've saved, the family we've built. She paused. Does that mean something good came from something evil? Silas was quiet for a long moment. I think it means that we chose to make something good, that evil doesn't have the last word unless we let it. That's very philosophical for a rancher. I've had a lot of time to think. Clara laughed a real laugh, full and warm, the kind of laugh that had become so common over the years that she'd almost forgotten a time when she didn't know how to make it. I love you, Silas Brennan. I love you too, Clara Brennan. He took her hand. Every day for 20 years, and every day for whatever time we've got left. Is that a promise? It's the only one that matters. The letter came on a Tuesday afternoon. Clara was in the schoolhouse when Daniel brought it to her, his face pale. It's from the territorial prison, he said. About Victor. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She'd known this day would come eventually. Victor's execution had been stayed for appeals, then delayed again. 20 years of legal maneuvering, of new evidence, of procedural challenges. But now finally it was over. Victor Weston was executed at dawn this morning, the letter read. Per the prisoner's final request, his personal effects are to be delivered to Mrs. Clara Brennan of Haven Ranch. What personal effects? Daniel asked. Clara found them at the bottom of the envelope. A single sheet of paper folded into quarters. And a ring. Henry's wedding ring, the one Victor had taken from his brother's body 20 years ago. She unfolded the paper. Clara, the letter read. If you're reading this, I'm dead. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I've spent 20 years in a cell thinking about what I did, about Henry, about you, about those children I tried to sell like cattle. And I've realized something. You were right. Family isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about choosing to belong to each other even when the world gives you every reason not to. I never understood that. Henry did. You did. That's why you won. That's why you'll always win. I'm returning Henry's ring. It belongs with you, not with me. Tell the children. Tell them I'm sorry. For everything. Victor. Clara stared at the letter for a long time. Mama. Daniel's voice was gentle. Are you okay? I don't know. She looked up at him, this boy who had become a man, this orphan who had become her son. I spent 20 years hating him, 20 years waiting for him to pay for what he did. And now I just feel sad. She folded the letter carefully. Sad that he never understood what he was missing. Sad that he died alone without anyone to love him. Sad that all his money and power couldn't buy him the one thing that actually matters. What's that? Clara looked at the ring in her hand. Henry's ring. The ring she'd placed on his finger the day they were married. The ring he'd worn until the day he died. A family, she said. Someone to come home to. Someone to fight for. Someone to love you even when you don't deserve it. She slipped the ring onto her finger next to the one Silas had given her 20 years ago. Goodbye, Victor, she whispered. I hope you finally found peace. The memorial service was held on a Sunday afternoon. Not for Victor, he was buried in an unmarked grave, his funeral attended by no one. But for everyone they'd lost along the way. Henry, Abel Stone, the children who hadn't survived the journey. The dreams that had died so that new dreams could be born. The whole community gathered beneath the cottonwood trees, staff and students, neighbors and friends. The vast extended family that Haven Ranch had become over 2 decades. Pastor Blackwood's successor read from Scripture. Mrs. Prescott's granddaughter laid flowers at the memorial stone. And one by one, the children who had grown up at Haven Ranch stood to share their stories. Stories of loss and redemption. Stories of fear and courage. Stories of darkness and light. Daniel spoke last. 20 years ago, I was a scared kid with nothing to my name and no reason to believe the world would ever be kind to me. Then I met two people who changed everything, who showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. It's about showing up for each other. It's about loving someone even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He looked at Clara and Silas sitting in the front row, their hands intertwined. My mother and father gave me something I never thought I'd have. A home, a family, a reason to hope. And now, every day I get to pass that gift on to children just like me. Children who've been told they're worthless. Children who've been abandoned and abused and left to die. Children who've forgotten how to believe that anyone could love them. His voice cracked. That's the real legacy of Haven Ranch. Not the buildings or the programs or the money. The legacy is love. The legacy is showing up. The legacy is choosing every single day to be a family. He sat down. The crowd was silent. Then one by one they began to applaud. First a few people, then more, then everyone. A standing ovation that seemed to go on forever, a testament to everything this place had become. Clara leaned against Silas, tears streaming down her face. "We did good," she whispered. "We did." He kissed her temple. "We really did." That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Clara walked alone to the memorial stone. The stars were brilliant overhead, thousands of them, scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds flung by a careless god. The same stars that had watched over her 20 years ago, when she'd stumbled into a stranger's barn with a bullet in her leg, and 6 children depending on her for survival. So much had changed since then. So much had been lost. So much had been found. "Henry," she said softly, "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if there's anything beyond this life, or if we just disappear when we die. But if you're out there somewhere, I want you to know something." She touched the memorial stone, feeling the rough granite beneath her fingers. "I kept my promise. I protected them. All of them. Not just our 600s of children, thousands maybe. Children who had no one. Children who needed a family. Children just like the ones we found all those years ago." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I miss you. Every day I miss you. But I'm not sad anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just grateful. Grateful that I got to love you. Grateful that you taught me what family really means. Grateful that even though we only had a few years together, those years changed everything." She looked up at the stars. "Rest now, Henry. Rest knowing that your legacy lives on. That the love you gave us multiplied and spread and touched more lives than you ever could have imagined. That's the best gift you could have given me. The knowledge that love doesn't die. It just grows." She kissed her fingertips and pressed them against the stone. "Goodbye, my love. Until we meet again." Clara walked back to the cabin where Silas was waiting, where her children were sleeping, where everything she'd fought for, everything she'd nearly died for, had finally become real. She paused at the door and looked back at the ranch, at the buildings and the fields and the stars wheeling overhead, at the legacy that would outlast her, at the family that had been built from nothing but love and stubbornness, and the absolute refusal to give up. "Thank you," she whispered to no one, to everyone, to the universe that had given her so much pain and so much joy. Then she opened the door and stepped inside. Behind her, the stars continued their eternal dance. The wind whispered through the cottonwood trees. And Haven Ranch slept peacefully, dreaming of all the children yet to come, all the families yet to be built, all the love yet to be shared. Because in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. Not the money or the power or the victories won in courtrooms. Not the buildings or the programs or the recognition. Just love. Love that found a bleeding woman in a frozen barn. Love that turned strangers into family. Love that proved once and for all that no one in this world is ever truly alone. This was the story of Clara and Silas Brennan. This was the story of 6 orphans who found a home, This was the story of Haven Ranch, and it was proof that even in the darkest winter spring always comes.